start covering some more of the transportation operations areas, including work zones, road weather, and traffic incident management. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide, please. So as many people have mentioned, weather is obviously something that we need to consider with a large planned special event. It can cause people to change their plans. It can make certain situations dangerous. Really just depends on what the weather and the road weather impacts are. Obviously, viewing the eclipse is dependent on fair weather conditions. Dealing with that in Colorado, and you'll hear from Vince here in a little bit. Dealing with that in Wyoming, and Paul Schlatter will be speaking during this session on how day of things like cloud cover or precipitation on a localized area really can cause significant changes, and it can throw your best plans kind of out the window sometimes. So it's always really important, really good to loop in your National Weather Service. I think Lori's suggestion of bringing them into your TMC and also visiting their offices just to have that camaraderie, utilizing their tools like National Weather Service chat, having a one-on-one conversation with a meteorologist that's looking at the next 24 hours is something that I think is incredibly undervalued when it comes to planning for these things. So start thinking about that. And there's several agency and other stakeholder resources that we're going to talk about on this road weather management session. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide real quick. One of the things is the Pathfinder initiative. And for those who aren't really in the road weather management realm, the Pathfinder initiative is really that DOT coordination with your National Weather Service. It's a collaborative partnership where you get together and you review the forecast and you come up with a comprehensive, consistent, impact-based messaging that can be displayed on your 511. It can be displayed on your changeable message signs. And it's really not just pulling in those National Weather Service partners. You're also talking about a lot of state DOTs have third-party weather service providers, particularly when it comes to things like maintenance decision support systems, but also emergency management and your local public works. Pathfinder can be, its focus is in road weather, but it's a communication protocol essentially that can be expanded to include construction contractors with work zones. We did that in Colorado under our Pathfinder initiative. It can also be used for large incidents, fuel truck fires or hazmat conditions that happen on the interstate. It can be used in a myriad of different ways. So yes, Pathfinder is embedded very deeply into road weather, but it's important to start thinking of this as more of a framework, a communication protocol that can be utilized to inform travelers. And really that should help us improve safety, mobility, and the commerce of our travel in the US. Next slide, please. So leveraging Pathfinder for something like the total solar eclipse is you really want to delegate your key stakeholders from the state, DOT, law enforcement, other partners that I mentioned on the previous slide. Some things that you can consider now that we're 6 or 7 weeks away leading up to the eclipse is, develop and agree upon a coordinated public messaging language. I'll cover a little bit later some MUTCD compliant messages that can be used during the eclipse, but also think about National Weather Service as well, and your social media. Start using the same terms. National Weather Service can sometimes have more meteorological terms, and we need to translate those into road weather and transportation operations terms. So get together with those partners and start communicating with them on, okay, what does it mean when you say, expected, localized flooding? How can we communicate that in a certain way to our traveling public? Or what does a snow squall mean? That kind of stuff. How do we coordinate those terms? And in the days leading up to the event, really start looking at your forecasts. Start working with your National Weather Service partners. They're going to be running atmospheric models. Really, that 24 to 48 hour window is key. That's really when you start seeing the accuracy improve with modeling, as well as the confidence for your meteorologist to say, yes, I think this is going to happen. We should really start communicating this. And it really plays into something like a planned special event because it helps communicate ahead of time what people can expect. And really the emphasis behind this is changing driver behavior. making sure their driving behavior is safe and that they're not surprised by something that like an intense rainfall that they weren't expecting. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide. And now I get to introduce Vince Garcia, somebody that's been in the road weather management realm for quite some time. Vince Garcia is a graduate of the University of Wyoming with a degree in civil engineering and has worked for the Wyoming Department of Transportation in various capacities for over 38 years. He was instrumental in building statewide transportation in building the statewide transportation management center, and he's led a team that has deployed numerous intelligent transportation systems, including pre-trip, roadside, and in-vehicle systems. Vince, thanks for being here, and the floor is yours.
Thanks, David. And I guess to the Pathfinder element, we definitely been a big advocate of Pathfinder for a number of years. It's almost second nature to us at this point. We use it for virtually every winter event, and certainly during the eclipse. So if I could you just click on the movie to kind of set the scene? What we did is put together a time lapse of the webcam pictures that we had. And as you can see, traffic is going northbound from Colorado through Cheyenne. And then during the eclipse, things settle down, typical traffic patterns. And then after the eclipse, you'll see the flood of traffic heading back to Colorado well into the night. So those things that you heard about the traffic and the delays were very, very real. So next slide, please. And I guess in the interest of time, I can tell you that we did a lot of planning. I know that other states kind of covered this very well. Certainly Missouri covered this quite well. So I'm going to just ask to click to the next slide, please. Pre-event activities. One thing that I might bring to your attention is that we did do the pre-positioning of assets, and we certainly coordinated with people as much as possible. Next slide, please. I think our public affairs office would tell you that the biggest thing that they found that helped tell the story, the most impactful thing, was that our web cameras and certainly the traffic counts. We made sure that the normal traffic counters that were quite operational. We made sure that they had advanced information, and then after the event, we got the information about the traffic counts as quickly as possible, and even during the event. Next slide, please. Many of you know, but in Wyoming, the Highway Patrol is part of the Department of Transportation, so we worked well together. Maintenance personnel and troopers were staged for the event, and they worked well into the 20-hour range. Many of them were kind of focused on this event for the 3 days prior to this. The Highway Patrol saw a doubling of crashes from the previous year and almost a triple of the number of computer-aided dispatch events through the dispatch center over that 4-day period. Just to highlight that we will never be able to plan for everything. We even had a vehicle hit by a bison during this event. Next slide, please. This one might look like an eye chart to you. I apologize about that. And I'll kind of just touch it very briefly, but many things worked quite well, including the statewide radio network, which was really critical to us, and the cell network. We were a little bit concerned about that. We did a lot of preparation in advance with the cell companies. Being in Wyoming, our cell communication is a little inferior. They brought in additional resources, and that worked out well. The preparations really paid off. Also working with local communities and organization within WYDOT and the state, other sister agencies. Next slide, please. Jumping into some of the lessons learned. First, as you heard, the weather really looked like it wasn't going to cooperate. We had clouds over most of the state for a few days prior to the eclipse, and the forecasters were telling people, much like you heard, I think, in Missouri, they were telling people places to get better viewing locations. So people were driving all over the state, kind of chasing point to point. As it turned out, the clouds lifted all over the state, and it was really a great viewing event. Traffic volumes were at record levels for us. I can't imagine really another single event that would generate this kind of traffic, and you'll hear that from a number of people. But people need to be patient, and they really need to plan for this, almost like they would plan for a winter storm. They need to have a full tank of gas. They need to have water. They need to have food, because they are going to be delayed. And it's it's clear that you need as many facilities as possible. You can never have enough bathrooms. We'll hit that maybe a couple of times. But people should be very much prepared for this. Next slide, please. So in terms of rest areas, YDOT has a bunch of those, and many of them use septic systems. We had to pump those prior to the event. Probably could have had to been prepared to pump those during the event as well. They really did fill up. We had to mow adjacent locations because we had situations where it was August in Wyoming. That's the driest time of year. Certainly the conditions are such that if a person were to park into areas in the right of way, they could have started a grass fire. So we had to be prepared for that. More porta potties. We had a lot of impact at the regional airports. People were actually popping from airport to airport going across this to get as much viewing as possible. So those small little regional airports, they could have even used additional bathroom facilities. We probably made a bit of a mistake in terms of construction. We anticipated that there would be a lot more activity prior to the event. And so we closed down construction for like 5 days prior to the event. We learned that that wasn't necessary. Really, the day of the event and the day after were all we really need to focus on. I think you kind of heard that from Missouri as well. Next slide, please. Restrictions. We also put some restrictions in place to limit oversized vehicles prior to the event and during the event. We were able to lift that early. It turned out that was not as big of a concern as we thought it might be. Traffic counts, this was a huge thing. We had to make sure those things were working and get the information to the public as quickly as possible. We had to train people on how to report those traffic numbers as well, because you can imagine that a person went over multiple counters. People wanted to anticipate that, there were millions of people that came in the state. Well, they were going over multiple counters. So they had to be able to understand that. The patrol had to staff up for this. So I think I actually missed a slide, but the numbers are kind of impressive in terms of what the patrol had to deal with. Next slide, please. Satellite phones. We were prepared with satellite phones, but frankly, we didn't even need them. It turned out that they didn't add a lot of value. So I'm not sure what others feel about that, but we didn't find that to be all that effective. And then in terms of the media, we could have probably used our highway advisory radios more. The small communities, they work really well for big events, we found. And as a result, people could tune to those and get information in locations far away from a dynamic message sign or a variable message sign. We could have staged people for real-time information, almost like reporters, pulling information and relaying it to the public and getting interviews and the like. We probably were overly focused on social media. We could have used the regular media more efficiently and more effectively. Next slide, please. The governor's office made a huge effort to really combine efforts. And so we were working with Homeland Security and tourism and the like, certainly in the National Weather Service. We held pre-event conferences and conferences leading up to this event. We held them during the event and then after, and those were very, very successful. So credit to the governor with respect to that. And then in terms of benefits, we found that this is really the event that probably tested our systems, our highways and airports more than any other that we've seen before and may see in some time. It allowed us to build valuable partnerships with other state agencies and allowed us to kind of realize what we need to do to handle these really big events. Next slide, please. And that's what I have for you, David. I could go back to the Highway Patrol slide if you'd like.
Yeah, go ahead real quick.
Can we roll back a few? I'm not sure why I missed that.
I think I saw it earlier.
Did you? There it is.
Yeah.
I guess I did kind of address this. Like the one thing that I guess I will tell you is the crashes were more than double. And then again, the workload for the patrol was about, in terms of patrol dispatch, was about triple. So I did cover that. I apologize.
Oh, no worries. I see there's one vehicle with the bison hit there under the crash column. That one always makes me smile, but probably a dangerous situation, but not something you hear every day. So
Not something here every day, but certainly that'll stop a car.
it certainly will. Thanks, Vince. I appreciate you taking
You
the
bet.
time to share your experiences with us. All right, let's go ahead and move forward to the next speaker. We have Paul Schlatter, my former Pathfinder buddy in Boulder office. So Paul is the Science and Operations Officer at the National Weather Service Forecast Office in Boulder, Colorado, a position he's held for over 7 years. Paul has been with the National Weather Service his entire 21-year career with positions in Norman, Oklahoma, as well as at the NOAA and National Weather Service headquarters in the Washington, D.C. area. Paul, it's great to see you, and thanks for hopping on. And let's share some of our experiences we endured during the 2017 eclipse.
Oh yeah, for sure. And thanks for having me, David. It's a pleasure to be here. So yeah, so I'm going to give the perspective of the services that the National Weather Service provided during the 2017 eclipse, and these are also many of the same things that any weather service office that you all are connected with could easily do for you as well. So just kind of look at it through that lens. Next slide. But before we talk about the eclipse, I think it's important to at least give an overview of what our relationship was with CDOT prior to the 2017 eclipse. Back in 2016, CDOT hired a meteorologist for the first time. Hit the mouse button, please. And I think we all know who that was. It was David Johnson. And he kind of transformed or helped us transform the relationship we had with CDOT. Before he was hired, our tie into CDOT wasn't all that great. And since he's been hired, things have completely turned around. Now we're like, we're completely simpatico, but with CDOT, we're attached at the hip. Next slide. And David was so successful. He was a one-person army for several years there before coming to Federal Highways that they now have 2 meteorologists on staff, and they're both excellent to work with. So next slide. So the partnership as it stands today, as I kind of mentioned or alluded to, we're pretty much on speed dial with each other, mostly for winter storm events, but we're also helping with, fire weather and, and severe weather. We have yearly tag ups with the 2 meteorologists just to make sure that we're meeting CDOT's needs and they're getting what they need from us. We're also pretty innovative, and I'll show an example of that in another slide. Next slide. So some of the things we do, eclipse or not, are tailored briefings mainly for winter weather, where CDOT will request these tailored briefings. It's sent out. We send it to CDOT as a PDF built through Google Slides. We break down each slide by their zones, their transportation zones, and we include all the key weather information that they need. The 3 Colorado offices that serve the bulk of Colorado, Grand Junction, Pueblo, and our office in Boulder, we all coordinate on this single briefing package. So the CDOT just sees a seamless forecast targeted to their zones and with the snowfall, winds, and other information that we can provide. A lot of the time when we deliver these briefings, we also do a conference call where they let us lead off maybe 3 to 5 minutes on just what the key points are for the winter storm to expect. So we've got that really tight relationship going, and it's been going for years now. Next. So here's where the innovation comes in. Just in the last year, starting last year, all the Colorado forecast offices coordinated on video messaging sign suggestions. This is exactly what the interface looks like, that kind of spreadsheet that you see right there. So each office fills it out. The CDOT zones are on the left. They have access to the snow and wind products. And then we kind of recommend or give the message options for what to expect, whether it's, unbelievably heavy snow, impossible travel, and it's all kind of streamlined that way. We update this at least twice a day during active snowfall, prior to the snowfall, and then during the active snowfall. It's about twice a day. We'll update it and send it to CDOT. Next slide. Now we get to the eclipse. So on this map here, you'll see, our area of responsibility is north central, northeast Colorado. So you'll note that the totality path was well north of us. But as Vince showed before, the traffic, there's 4 million people that live along the Front Range of Colorado, and a lot of them wanted to see the eclipse. So the only way to do that was to drive north into Wyoming. Some went to the Nebraska Panhandle. But either way, the congestion on our north-south highways was intense. So CDOT was expecting 400,000 extra vehicles driving north before the eclipse, 900,000 people. So obviously, we already know about all the stress on infrastructure. Next slide. So how do we coordinate with CDOT? They wanted formal briefings via conference call at 1 p.m. each day leading up to the eclipse, and then 9 a.m. the day of the eclipse. Then they started doing the variable messaging signs on the 17th leading up to it. Next slide. So what was that coordination about? So they really wanted cloud coverage and location. And I know David and I know Vince mentioned it, and some of the other previous talkers mentioned that depending on where the clouds were, if it was super cloudy in one part of the totality path, everyone would migrate to the clear spot, or a spot that they felt was going to be clear. So they needed to anticipate where that traffic flow would really go. We got lucky that day. Not really lucky, just it was a calm day for weather. But late August can still have some thunderstorms and even severe thunderstorms. So you don't really want that with hundreds of thousands of people outside. So they really need to know thunderstorm chances and if severe. And it can still be kind of hot in late August. So they wanted to know max temperatures. So at first they're like, well, you can just verbally brief us on this. But in 2017, we had the capability to do graphics. So next slide. So we did all this in a graphics form. Next slide, please. With high temperature and percentage of cloud cover. I've been in the weather service. I've been a weather freak my entire life. That's most of the weather service people are. But I can't tell you how much I was sweating a cloud forecast. I have never sweat a cloud forecast as that morning and the days leading up to it, because we knew how much was riding on what our forecast was going to say based on where we thought it would be the thickest cloud cover. So these graphics, they don't look that great, 2017 graphics ability, but in 2024, our graphics are far superior to this. Any office that you all work with, any weather service office, can easily reproduce much better graphics than this in today's technology. So cloud cover, we could do it every 3 hours. We could even do it every hour if you want for that. Next slide. So we delivered that to CDOT. If you can hit play, did this just a cool shot of satellite with the eclipse going over Wyoming and Nebraska. This may not work. If it doesn't, we'll move on. Yeah, we'll move on. No problem. We've all seen the eclipse before from satellite. So summarizing, it was really a non-event. We over forecast the clouds a little bit, so it was actually clearer than our forecast had it. Was not a single storm of any kind in Wyoming and Nebraska where the totality was. And CDOT, David, for sure, I think one of these was at least your quotes. You were ready, and you really love the cloud cover graphics. So those are easily things that any weather service office can do for a Department of Transportation agency. And thank you for your time. Oh yeah, I'll be ready for the next one. That's going right overhead for us, so that'll be a good one.